welcome back to another episode of All Out Nevada, your go-to podcast for insightful glimpses into the Nevada judiciary. I'm your host, Seth Easley, representing the Supreme Court Nevada Administrative Office of the Courts. On today's episode, we are taking a look at the 8th Judicial District Court's Gambling Treatment Diversion Court, a specialty court designed to address the intersection between problem gambling, addiction, and the criminal justice system. Today, joining me, I have two guests to discuss this important program. I have Judge Maria Gall, who serves as the presiding judge over this program, and Josephine Bonomo, specialty court specialist who works with this specialty court. Judge Gall and Josephine, thank you both for joining me today.
Very welcome. Thank you for having us. My pleasure.
So, Judge Gall, for listeners who may not be familiar, what is the Gambling Treatment Diversion Court and what problem is it designed to address?
So I'm just going to call it gambling court for short, but what the court is in the name. It is a diversion court, and it encompasses a court-supervised treatment program, a comprehensive program for defendants who are in the criminal justice system at the district court level who have gambling problems that precipitated or that are that predicated the crime that's at issue.
Kind of building on that, what prompted the creation of a specialty court like this?
So what originally prompted it was there was an assembly bill created. It was called Assembly Bill 102, which was enacted into law in October of 2009. And that bill is codified into statute at NRS Chapter 458A. And that statute authorizes the criminal court to determine if an individual is eligible for diversion treatment due to a gambling addiction. Despite that statute going into effect in 2009, it actually took almost 10 years after the effective statute for Nevada to establish its first gambling treatment diversion court. A little bit of this is speculation on my part because I didn't participate in the enactment of 458A, but I have to imagine that given Nevada's, unique economic atmosphere of really being the home of gambling, that we see gambling addiction and the crimes that it can lead to, which, we can talk about a little bit more, but really, span the gamut of crimes. And just like any other specialty court, whether it's drug court or whether it's mental health court, the idea is that if you can treat the underlying problem, you can get somebody out of the system.
Right. Kind of break the cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, Josephine, from a clinical standpoint, how is problem gambling similar to or different from other addictions we tend to see in specialty courts?
So there are a couple similarities from other addictions. Problem gambling has the same core symptoms of drug and alcohol addiction. So with any addiction like substance use, there's a preoccupation with the behavior. People can't stop thinking about wanting to do the behavior. It's very difficult for them to stop, even though they may try to stop. They may use the behavior to escape reality or try to help their mood feel better. They may lie to hide the behavior, and they may continue doing it in spite of negative consequences, including getting in trouble with the law. Just like in other addictions we see in specialty courts, the treatment process is very similar. So like with any addiction, the focus is on using treatment to target ways people are thinking. So any possible maladaptive thought patterns. The focus is then on changing the actual behaviors and then building a really strong support network to continue positive outcomes. There's some major differences as well that we see in other addictions in specialty courts. One of them, and maybe the major one of them, is the evolution of identifying and treating problem gambling. The identification and treatment of substance use has historically been in the forefront in mental health field. Drug courts and adult drug courts in the justice system were first to be developed ever. The one here in our courts was developed about 30 years ago, so it's a very long-standing drug court. On the other hand, problem gambling was only recently identified as a behavioral addiction in our mental health field, so it's relatively new. And recognizing problem gambling requiring treatment via specialty court is taking time as well. So we're kind of catching up as far as that as well. And our gambling court here, like Judge Gall mentioned, started about 8 years ago, so it's relatively new.
Right. So it just has not been recognized as a mental health issue as long as kind of drug abuse issues, I guess.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Judge Gall, kind of going to the eligibility side, who is eligible for the program? And how does the court determine whether someone's offense is connected to problem gambling?
Okay, so actually, your question really is on 2 points because under the statute, eligibility is different from suitability. There's 2 different provisions. So and I'll talk about each. The eligibility criteria is found in NRS 458A 210. And there's inclusionary criteria and exclusionary criteria. So the inclusionary criteria, or rather, what I'll say, let me start with the exclusionary. The exclusionary criteria is that basically it can't be certain violent crimes. So the underlying offense that the defendant is charged with can't be a crime punishable under NRS Chapter 200. It can't be a crime against a child that's defined in 179D.0357. It can't be a sex offense. It can't be a domestic violence related offense. So it can't basically, the best way to sum it up is that the underlying offense can't be a violent offense. You also cannot have 2 or more convictions of one of those types of crimes, whether it's in Nevada or whether it's in another state. You can't have 3 or more convictions of any felony. So if you have 3 felonies that happen to be nonviolent crimes, like let's say 3 grand larcenies, that you are not eligible anymore. You cannot have another criminal proceeding alleging the commission of a felony. And so oftentimes we will see defendants, with multiple charges in multiple cases. So because we can't control necessarily how another case turns out, you can't have another pending felony proceeding. It's a maybe if you're on probation and parole or parole for another crime. It's a maybe. Basically, if you're on probation or parole, the PMP has to consent to you participating in gambling treatment diversion court. And this is also another maybe. You can't have been previously assigned to gambling treatment diversion court, meaning you came once and failed and now you're back again, although that's a maybe. There is discretion with the court on whether to readmit somebody. And we have done that actually in the past when for certain reasons somebody had to leave the court and then they've come back and we found them eligible. The other side of it, the suitability side, right, is really about whether or not a mental health professional has determined that the defendant has an addictive disorder related to gambling and that the defendant committed the crime at issue in furtherance of or as a result of the problem gambling, and that the mental health professional has also determined that the defendant is likely to be rehabilitated through treatment and as a result has recommended the defendant for problem gambling court. So in order to make it into problem gambling court, these, what we call the sentencing judge, so not me, it could in theory be me, but me as a judge presiding over my own criminal docket as opposed to problem gambling court.
Right.
So the sentencing judge who has the case initially needs to make all of those eligibility and suitability findings. And then they get referred to us for an assessment in gambling court.
Okay, so that leads perfectly into my next question. So Josephine, building on that, what does the clinical assessment process look like for determining whether someone is a problem gambler?
So the clinical assessment requires a licensed clinician to use criteria from our diagnostic manual, the DSM 5R now, the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, to determine if the gambling that is occurring, the gambling behavior is persistent and causing significant distress. So this should be a rather lengthy assessment to kind of get a pattern of behavior, and it has to be within a 12-month period of time. So there's a period of time that we measure. Clinicians have to ask questions to gather information regarding the different criteria that's listed in our manual to make that determination. So typically this is done in the context of completing a full clinical evaluation that encompasses more than just the gambling behavior, but their psychosocial history. So we look into substance use, we look into their family, their social situation, and any mental health history. So it's a gathering of all that information with the diagnostic workup for potential gambling.
And when you say it has to happen within 12 months, it's within 12 months of something happening, or?
No, so the gambling behavior that is of concern has to be persistent. So over a period of time,
I see,
within those 12 months, and it has to cause significant distress. So typically somebody who drops $20 in a penny machine once a month when they're watching a movie at a casino, after they watch a movie at a casino, and they can afford to lose that money, it does not cause them distress. While that might be persistent and over time a pattern, but there's no distress. There's no financial issues that are related to it. There's no stressors. They can stop if they had to. But when it's somebody who cannot stop over a 12-month period of time and is causing a significant amount of distress, they can't stop thinking about it, it's causing financial ruin, impacts on relationships, things like that, then we would consider that a high likelihood for that disorder to be present.
Okay, that helps. That little example kind of helps put it into context. Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode of All Out Nevada. We're always striving to bring you valuable insights and education, not just for judicial officers, but for anyone interested in the Nevada judiciary. If you find our content helpful or intriguing, please share your experience with your friends, family, and colleagues. Your support helps us reach a broader audience and ensures that more people can benefit from our discussions. Thank you for listening and supporting All Out Nevada. So, Judge Gall, what happens after someone is accepted into the program? What does participation look like?
So once the sentencing judge makes a finding of eligibility and suitability and refers the person to gambling court, Josephine will do her assessment, and then Josephine will make her recommendation for acceptance. And by the way, sometimes even if a person is eligible and suitable from the sentencing judge's perspective, there may be reasons why they wouldn't be accepted into the court. For instance, they may have a gambling problem, but they may also have another disorder. They may have a significant drug addiction. And we may decide between Josephine as the court coordinator, myself, there's a DA, there's also a defense attorney, and stakeholders, treatment providers and advocates, that we're not setting the person up for success in our court. But absent that, if we accept somebody in, they make a first appearance in the court. I relay all of the conditions of being in the court, some of which include you have to have full-time legitimate employment. That part is very important to us because typically there's a restitution component of someone being in problem gambling court. You can't drink alcohol, do drugs. You're put on random drug tests. And part of the reasoning on that is, and this goes a little bit more into the clinical side, is we don't want someone substituting one addictive behavior with another addictive behavior while they're undergoing clinical treatment. Another major component is that they have to turn over all of their financial information to us. Again, that goes to the restitution side, but also some of the rehabilitation side as well, because we want to make sure that the person is meeting any of their restitution obligations. But we also want to make sure that they're put into a more stable financial position so that, one, there's no relapse of the problem gambling behaviors, but two, once they eventually leave the court, that they'll be in a position where they can continue to make restitution payments. So initially, after acceptance, after that first appearance, and the person is advised of everything that the program will entail, and they've accepted all the conditions that have been imposed upon them, we have status checks. And depending on which phase of the program you're in, your status checks will either be every 2 weeks, which is what we start at the start of the program. And Josephine can correct me if I'm wrong about this next part, but I believe then as they progress through the program, it goes to every 4 weeks, and then eventually it goes to every 6 weeks towards the end of the program. Once, they're on the road basically to graduation. But it's a big work for them because you're participating in treatment on the clinical side. You are meeting with a financial counselor, and you're going to GA or Gamblers Anonymous meetings. And in the meantime, you're having to search for or hold down legitimate full-time employment as well. And all of that is, can be very, very challenging for some of the participants in our program. I didn't know if Josephine had anything to add to that.
Judge Gall, I think you covered it all.
So how long does the program typically take? Like, is there a set amount of time, or is it?
There is. Okay. So legally, you cannot be in the program for more than 3 years. So there is an outside window. By statute, you either have to graduate from the program or you don't graduate from the program, in which case you don't get the benefit of the program, which is namely you get dismissal of the charges if you successfully complete its requirements if you graduate. But in theory, you could graduate in as little as 18 months.
I see.
If you've paid back your restitution, if you've completed all of your clinical requirements, I don't think we've ever had someone graduate in 18 months. And that's because the first phase of the program usually takes longer than 3 months. So each phase takes about 3 months. The first phase is usually the one participants find the most challenging because you have to get all your finances together. You have to go through your initial clinical assessments. You have to go through the financial counseling. We have to set your restitution. You may be looking for a job. I do not send anyone to the second phase that has restitution until they have legitimate full-time employment.
Okay, I see. That kind of sets the stage for my next question. So there's a lot of components, a lot of moving parts to this program, it sounds like. So Josephine, can you kind of walk us through what treatment typically looks like for the participant?
Sure, absolutely. So we were fortunate to partner with the Problem Gaming Center here in town, and they provide treatment for our program participants. Like Judge Gall was saying, it's very intensive at the beginning. So when a participant first starts our program, they typically begin at an intensive outpatient level of care. We call that IOP, which is 3-hour sessions 4 times a week. So it's a total of 12 hours a week for about 6 weeks. So it's almost a whole full part-time job at the beginning of the program. If after those 6 weeks of intensive outpatient, the clinician believes the participant is stable, treatment will move to what we call an outpatient level of care. And outpatient treatment typically is 1 weekly group and 1 individual therapy a week. So it's still 2 hours a week. Now, that is potentially a fluctuating schedule at different points of time. The frequency of the group and the frequency of individual therapy may change depending on the client's progress and what the clinician feels is most appropriate. By the end of the latter part of the program, so towards the end, when we're heading towards the graduation, we expect formal treatment completion and only occasional follow-ups as needed. Or if we're feeling like there might be some potential stressors, they need extra support, we may ask for a little bit more treatment to help them kind of get over those challenges in a healthy way. So throughout the program, participants are required to attend the GA, the Gamblers Anonymous community support groups, and there are many in town. And Problem Gaming Center offers lots of other different types of resources to participants and community members. Sometimes we have offered family therapy for our participant and their families, couples treatment for our participants and their partners. So there's different levels of care at Problem Gaming Center and different methods of treatment to target potential issues and challenges.
So the co-occurring issues kind of came up a little bit earlier. So Josephine, can you kind of expand on that a little bit? What kind of co-occurring issues kind of show up when looking at problem gambling? What kind of overlap do we see with other issues?
So there's definitely overlap, right? It's very common for people with problem gambling to have issues related to substance use, mood regulation issues like depression and or anxiety. In trauma, there are actually a lot of veterans out in the community with PTSD who use gambling as a way to escape. Like substance use, gambling is a way for people to help themselves cope with emotions. So gambling tends to be a way for them to kind of take themselves out of reality. So that is one of the major coping skills that people with co-occurring issues use.
So Judge Gall, specialty courts balance accountability with rehabilitation. How does that balance play out in this court?
So most of the crimes that we see in problem gambling court are theft-related offenses.
Okay.
Whether it's embezzlement, we see a lot of embezzlement from businesses. We see some theft, outright theft. We see some credit card fraud. Every once in a while, we'll see cheating at gambling, as which is a theft type crime as well. You're stealing from the casino by cheating at the game. So generally what we're seeing are these theft related offenses. And typically there's a monetary victimization there, meaning there's a loss of either real money, or this is always tough with cheating at gambling because, it's all play. Like in one sense, a lot of people say it's all play money in a sense when you're cheating at gambling. I don't think the casino. I will say this: I don't think the casinos who run this as a business model quite see it that way. They lose it. I would think that they would see it as a loss of opportunity or a loss of profit, something along those lines. But because it's a monetary related offense, and we specifically exclude, the statute specifically excludes violent crimes, the accountability is the restitution component. And the reason we emphasize restitution so much is because if the state and the victim are not going to get their pound of flesh, then they should get their pound of gold, is the way I put it. And so it becomes a very important component of accountability, but also rehabilitation, because having that moment where the participant is able to make the victim whole, I think goes a long ways to not only taking accountability from the legal end, but taking accountability for purposes of rehabilitation and making the victim whole and getting on the road to recovery. So it's a little bit of a Venn diagram, if you think about it. There's the pure accountability, but there's also the rehabilitation. And then you put it together, and there's certainly overlap here.
I can definitely see that, like how the restitution, like almost like amends, so to speak, is part of the rehabilitation process. I haven't thought about them being joined like that or overlap in such a way.
They're not mutually exclusive. And actually, I know this question was to me, but because I'm not a clinician and I rely so much on the clinicians who participate in the program, Josephine might be able to speak a little bit more about how, the restitution accountability component plays into the treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. So we target accountability through treatment. GA runs their model of treatment, community support groups, very similarly, if not the same, as other support groups like AA or NA. And part of their 12 steps is asking for forgiveness for the wrongs you've made, and then holding yourself accountable and repaying in whatever way that you've made damage or had people suffer because of your behaviors. So GA actually promotes that level of accountability. In fact, we've had participants who go above and beyond the restitution that they have to pay through the court and take it upon themselves, as they should, because of treatment prompting them to pay back their families who they borrowed money for to gamble. And so that shows a great amount of treatment progress when they're not only paying back restitution because court is ordering it, but now they're going back to their families and friends and saying, I'm sorry I did that. I stole money from you. I borrowed money from you. I did wrong, and I'm going to pay it back. So that's one avenue of accountability and treatment. The other is that we have all participants attend moral recognition therapy. It's MRT. They are groups in the community that go through different steps, focusing on honesty, accountability, and paying back in the community. So while it doesn't necessarily talk about paying back money or restitution, there's a component of community service. So you're paying back in community service, remembering that our actions, especially related to dishonesty and behaviors, hurts people, and that we need to pay back in any way, shape, or form so that we make our community whole again. So those are the two ways that we target accountability as well.
A heartfelt appreciation to our guest and to everyone who has tuned into this podcast. Before we wrap up, here are a couple of quick important reminders. For continuing legal education credit, be sure to complete a certificate of attendance and email it to jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov. If you have any questions, topic suggestions, or comments, we welcome your input. You can email us at jepodcast@nvcourts.nv.gov or submit your topic ideas to the topic suggestion form linked in the episode description. We value and look forward to hearing from our listeners. Stay tuned for more episodes of All Out Nevada. This is Seth Easley signing off. Take care, Nevada.